Well, as we put aside maximum male models, I do want to talk about our lead story this week, which is a little different. It's like walking down memory lane to the year 2015, 7 years ago this week. I was watching Monday Night Raw. I believe Scott was too at the time. And the show took place, I believe, from Atlanta, Georgia. And Stephanie McMahon, founder of women's wrestling, insert sarcasm here, shook things up on Monday Night Raw by introducing three of the very best from NXT. At the time, we had the NXT Women's Champion Sasha Banks alongside Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch making their main roster debuts to remind fans that, yeah, wrestling matters in some ways, because they were doing business down at NXT alongside Bayley at the time, putting in classics on NXT. Takeovers were a thing at the time, about to make the jump from Full Sail to the Barclays Center in Brooklyn 1 month later. And it was just a nice breath of fresh air. But of course, WWE is going to WWE by doing the most, and did not get this right until WrestleMania 32, about 6 or 7 months later. But the effort to try to change the perception of women's wrestling on the main roster was greatly appreciated. But let it be known that Stephanie did not invent wrestling. She was not a part of the revolution per se, because I watched WWE dating back to the early 2000s, and I just found it funny trying to whitewash Trish and Lita and Jazz and Jacqueline and Ivory and Gail Kim and Victoria and Mickie James. They tried to erase that history, which was very prevalent, and you didn't need to market what women's wrestling was at the time. It was you that dropped the ball by going to the catalogs and training people that weren't wrestlers at the time, and you just push them on TV, and that is what led to the stagnation of the Divas division for 7 to 8 years. You dropped the ball because when you cared, it mattered. There was no agenda. And then you got a fire lit under your ass to say you need to change this perception of what women's wrestling is and what it can be via the work that was done on NXT by Triple H around 2012.
Yeah, I think that's all spot on. And you bring up a good point about how there were wrestlers who were putting on good matches, or at least trying to put on good matches. One match in particular, I think of before the big quote unquote, women's revolution, which, if we're being honest, started with Gail Kim and then those knockouts over there in TNA. But one match that stands out to me before in WWE is Beth Phoenix versus Molina in a submissions match. And you're probably thinking, what in the world? Are you serious? That is one of the better women's matches you will find. And it's when I say that because you don't have that many. You've got Lita versus Trish in the main event of Raw. You've got the Mickie Trish match at WrestleMania. You've got Trish versus Lita and Trish's retirement match, but you don't have that many great go-to matches. You have some, forgotten gems like the one I mentioned, like Molina and Beth Phoenix. You have big moments like Beth Phoenix slamming Eve off the top rope with the glam slam and stuff like that. But you don't have these great women's wrestling matches that came after this. So I'm glad you brought that up, just because they should be recognized for the talent that they had and for trying. You could tell they put effort into their matches. They only had 5, 6, 7. Even that submission match only had 8, 9 minutes, but they jam-packed it. They put a lot into it, a lot of thought, and you could tell that they just care. So I'm really glad that you brought that point up about the talent that was there. That's always been there. They just didn't get the opportunities that these women have, and they did lay that foundation down for them.
Absolutely. And I go to Beth Phoenix, who was ahead of her time in a lot of ways. And I love that submission match, as you mentioned, because it was so good and hard hitting for the time they had. But I go to comments that Molina and Michelle McCool and Beth Phoenix made several years ago, noting they told us, don't hit hard. Don't do that. That's what guys do. Don't do that move. That's what guys do. And that was so frustrating to say, oh, so we can't do what the guys do. Let's do what the women are supposed to do. Why try to put labels on what women can and cannot do in the ring? Let's not be too ambitious. Let's not do too much. And that was a very frustrating time as a fan, that you had to listen to near silence during these matches. And the ladies tried everything they could to get over. You had glimmers of hope here and there via AJ Lee versus Caitlyn, another underrated feud that was ahead of its time. But as you mentioned, it was very hard to find a singular feud that stood out between 2008 and ultimately 2015. Paige tried to a point, but WWE was so half-assing what it meant to be a women's wrestler on the main roster at the time.
Yeah, even the Paige AJ Lee, kind of feud, that was more about the story than it was what was going on in the ring. And I think that's kind of where the big shift was. And it was kind of just going out there and showing we can put on these incredible matches that are more compelling than the men are doing. We can engage the audience. I mean, the audience was so willing and ready to accept the women. And I think that was the telling thing, how just ready everyone was. Like, yeah, like we're fully behind this. We're 100% ready to get behind this. Like when you were giving these people a story and an opportunity, they were knocking it out the park. Like it's just like the Mickey Trish Stratus match from WrestleMania. Like people talk about that because they did some crazy things, but the match was really good. The crowd was so hot for that match. Like the wrestling fans, we were ready to embrace the women. So it was time. And let's also put this on top of it. We had the right women to do it with. Again, we've always had them, but there was something special about this core, about this Sasha, Charlotte, Becky Lynch core that we had here. There's something different there was something special about it. So especially going against kind of the older guard, which was the Bellas, Alicia Fox, people like that. There was something different about that, a different energy that was brought. So everything happens for a reason when it's supposed to happen. And we had that perfect storm, that perfect lightning in a bottle. Because if it's not Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, like we had engaging people. We had the right cast at the right time.
Perfect timing. The execution was not perfect. I remember waiting 10 years, 10 WrestleManias since Trish versus Mickie James to find a good match. It happened at WrestleMania 32 in 2016, but 10 years was a long time to find that one matchup that would stand out at a WrestleMania. I survived Bunny Mania. I survived a Battle Royal that didn't matter. A tag team match that was okay at best. We endured the most. And then we got the reward in the end when they switched the Divas Championship into the WWE Women's Championship, courtesy of Lita. And that was a great moment to say, here's a new era that finally means something. And it all started one fateful night in Atlanta, July 2015. What a night it was. And I just go back to the introductions of Sasha, Charlotte, and Steampunk Becky, and they were over. And as you mentioned, we had the Bella Twins, Alicia Fox, Naomi, and Tamina, and Paige on the main roster at the time, and we got the clicks. We had PCB, we had Team Bad, and we had Team Bella.
And, this is not going to be popular opinion, but I will say this. Nikki Bella, I thought, played her role perfectly. She did exactly what she was supposed to do, and she held her end up inside the ring. She's not gonna put on the matches the caliber that Sasha and Charlotte or Sasha and Becky can put on together. But I thought for where she was, for what the matches she was putting on, to being able to put these matches on with them, I thought that she was the perfect foil for these women too. And of course, it had to be Charlotte, to be the one to dethrone her. But I thought that Nikki Bella was the perfect foil for all of this. So everything just worked. Like Nikki Bella is kind of one of the faces of the Divas. Like she's a face of the Divas division. She had a show created after her and Brie, Total Divas, Total Bellas. Like she's the face of it. And it worked perfectly for her to be this long reigning dominant champion to be dethroned by the new generation. Again, everything was just lightning in a bottle, just a perfect situation here.
Yeah, I got to give Nikki props too. I mean, she improved when she returned to WWE in 2012, 2013, and she and Brie left because of what we said, because the opportunities weren't there and you get tired of the same old stuff when you're underappreciated and you're not getting the storylines that you deserve, you're not getting the push that you feel that you need in order to really highlight women's wrestling on WWE in a better way. And I will say that Nikki's very last match in WWE prior to her walking away due to her neck injury was in October 2015, the rematch between Charlotte Flair and herself for the Divas Championship. I thought that was a great way for Nikki to officially pass the baton to Charlotte, say, you got this division in your hands. This belongs to you now. And I thought that was a great moment. And Nikki improved greatly in the ring, not only as a performer, but as a character. You needed someone like that because she was the face of the Divas division. And in some ways, it was a standard that fans were tired of, but she was necessary. She was needed to push forth what we see today.
And like you said, she put the work in. Like I will always have a respect for somebody who will put the work in. And again, not a popular opinion, but she has a fan base. Like the Bellas have a loyal fan base that will follow them, ride or die. Even though she was a heel, people were still cheering for her. Like, so you have to, like, all of that has to factor into all of it. And the fact that she was willing to put the work in, like we both mentioned, she got better and she was able to hang with them. Again, I'm not expecting her to put on a 5-star match with anybody, but she did her thing. She was the perfect foil. And what we got going forward was just, it was a good coordination. And I'm not a Charlotte hater, so I don't have a problem with Charlotte being the one to do that, because that's kind of been Charlotte's whole gimmick. She's the one to end streaks, to change the guard, to beat everybody. That's always been Charlotte's thing. So this is just how it's always been, and it's how it's still going now.
Yes, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through kind of like this mixed period in 2015 to early 2016 before WrestleMania. When did you sense the switch up? Because I want to see if your answer matches mine. When did you notice, like, okay, we see something here that is actually going to lead to something good? When was the moment for you regarding Charlotte, Sasha, and Becky that you said, aha, this is it. This is something we can work with, something that we can work with. I see the vision from this point forward.
So when they first debuted, I was not a fan of the clicks. I didn't like the big 3-man or 3-women tags. I thought it was, to me, it felt like you were just trying to get all the women on the screen at the same time at once. Let's quote unquote give the women time, but let's put all their time together at the same time. You got 9 women all together on the same screen, and I don't think we saw them for the rest of the show. So I didn't like that at first, but when you saw the matches that they were starting to put on, they were given more time. And I think that was kind of the key. They were given more time and the crowd was beginning to be invested with it. But I genuinely didn't think it was real. Like we were really going to get this big type of revolution, not even revolution, but just this kind of changing of the guard. Cause that's genuinely what it was until WrestleMania when we got the title. Like we know what WWE will do. We know how they'll pull the rug from under you. And I was just worried that this was going to be that 3-month experiment where we're like, look at what we're doing for the women. And there you go. It's like the black man push that you're going to get every February, it's just, the reparations push. That's what it is. You know what you're going to get every February. Somebody, a brother or a sister is going to get a nice little push coming in February. And that's what it felt like. But when we got that title and it felt like we got a main event caliber level match, and in my opinion, it was probably the best match on WrestleMania that year. That's when it felt like, okay, we're genuinely building a women's division now, a women's wrestling division.
My moment was the Royal Rumble 2016, and it was Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch for the Divas Championship. And this was the first matchup I saw when Becky and Charlotte were able to do their thing. Ric Flair was out there causing trouble, and he kissed Becky, and it was nasty, and they had to edit it off the network because there was no place for it. They learned their lesson. But the match was great nonetheless. But the moment I will always remember is that when the match was over, guess who came out to shake up the game? Sasha Banks. Her presence alone said, I got next. This is a nice moment for y'all, but don't forget about me. And that was the moment that really launched towards WrestleMania 32. And I thought that matchup at the Royal Rumble was a nice precursor for things to come. That was the first time I said, okay, you got something here. Don't mess it up. And since then, it's been smooth sailing in terms of this division being presented more seriously and given great storylines to boot.
Yeah, and it's, it goes back to just being given time and opportunities to show what you can do. And then when you knock it out the park, to continue be given that trust. And we all know it all comes down to one man and him having the trust and be like, okay, you did that. You go do that again. And we've seen those women, those three in particular, if we're being honest about it, have more trust than anybody on the roster. And the only other person I think who's getting that is you could throw Asuka and Bianca Belair and Bayley, but you could throw Asuka, Bianca Belair, but it's a select few, and those three have earned that trust because of the way they've been able to get the crowd engaged. Again, they were the right people for the job. They understood the assignment. They were the right people for the assignment. You couldn't give this assignment to somebody else and it worked like this. It might have worked, but I don't know if it works like this, to the point where we had a full-blown women's pay-per-view, a women's Royal Rumble, ladder matches, TLC matches, Elimination Chamber matches, closing out shows, 2 black women in a main event of WrestleMania. When has 2 black men even been in the main event of a WrestleMania? Like, all of that has been accomplished because of these 3 women being that foundation. And it goes in those moments that we're going to continue to talk about: the match with Becky, the new title at WrestleMania, the first Raw, the closing Raw out, multiple times, closing a pay-per-view out, having a Hell in a Cell match. These first time moments that they started having after that, these were the right women. It's all going to come back to that. Everything we talk about is going to come back to these women being the right people for the assignment.